Three, two, one, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in a DeLorean? Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Shady.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly?
Thank you for joining us. Tamara is the theme song singer, everyone, just so you know.
No. I will not be singing our theme song singer does a fantastic job, and I do not need to. I thought you were going to burst into it.
Burst, it's funny you mentioned that. I started. I said 3, 2, 1. Let's do it again. Let's go back to the Aliens franchise.
Let's do it. Yes, we are going to talk about some chest-bursting aliens today.
Yeah, and if your face is getting hugged today, congratulations. We humans need so many hugs per day to thrive. And face hugging is as good as any other.
And if you had some eggs for breakfast, you're welcome to join us as well. We got all the aliens goodies here today.
All the alien goodies.
Although specifically, we're going to be talking about Alien Resurrection, which is the fourth Alien movie.
This one is not known for being the best of the four.
Well, the thing is, here's the thing. Like, there are people who actually really love it. Like, what's so interesting is taking a deep dive into like some of the fandom pieces on it. Like, some people are like, and other people really sort of appreciate the direction that it went in. So it's definitely got its detractors and its supporters.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who's a French filmmaker. He had done Delicatessen. He did City of Lost Children. He does really beautiful visual work. This was his first big US studio film. So that was a big deal. And he definitely saw himself, he's talked about in interviews, like as somebody who was coming to sort of add to the franchise, but not change it. So whether that was successful or not, many people have different opinions about that. But what we're going to talk about specifically, because what is unique in Alien Resurrection is that there is a crossbreeding that happens. There is suddenly, I would say that up until now, the aliens have pretty much followed a more reptilian model of reproduction with laying eggs and facehuggers and things like that. In here, they cross over to mammalian production where...
That's right. And I got to say, though, it's not just reptilian. It's like reptilian metamorphosizing insect reproduction, right? And we're leaving out a couple of steps in this particular movie. And you get a cute little alien baby. So, another thing about this alien movie is that you get to see the aliens way more on screen. And, I recall going back to many movies from the 20th century, horror movies, where they would not reveal the actual monster. You see like their hand and, there's the movie, The Monster in the Closet. Remember that one? I don't know if it's considered a B movie.
No, I don't know.
But, it's right up there with Army of Darkness.
Uh-huh.
You don't know that? Oh, you got to watch The Monster in the Closet. It's amazing.
Okay, small reminder for our listeners. I don't like scary movies.
It ain't scary.
It's called The Monster in the Closet, though.
But it's hilarious, let me tell you. And it's somewhat of a love story. For those of you who know it, you know what I'm talking about.
All right.
It's a beautiful love story, human-monster love story. But here's the thing I'm getting at. Even in the first Aliens, it wasn't just like, boom, here's the alien. They sort of like hinted at it, and boom, here it is. And now this one, you're just getting to look at it from every perspective over and over.
Yeah. And
and
that actually has a lot to do with advances in filmmaking, right? So this was made in 1997, and the first Alien very much followed what I'll call like the Jaws format or the Jaws school of thought, which is like, show a little piece of the monster, because what you don't see is way scarier. And a lot of, up till now, the aliens have been done through practical effects. Resurrection is the first one where they combine practical effects, so puppeteering, with CGI. And that is the reason that they finally showed you more of the bodies, because you can do that with CGI, whereas doing that with practical effects with the puppeteering is really, really hard to make that look good, no matter how amazing your puppeteers are, which for this franchise, they've really been incredible. But that is a big part of the reason that there was that change this time around.
That is so cool. Okay, so the thing that you didn't mention is the cloning. You talked about the hybridization, but I think a big part of the science here that people who are fans of the series, the thing that they latched onto was the cloning of Ripley. So if you have not watched Alien 3, back to my DJ voice, baby. Ripley dies.
Sorry, spoiler.
Spoiler alert. But it is now Alien Resurrection. So they bring her back. How? By cloning. And what happens is she has memories of her Ripley life.
And this is also, to give context, this is 200 years after the end of Aliens 3.
Yes. And not only is she cloned and still has memories of her Ripley life, she's cloned, she comes out an adult, and she is pregnant.
With an alien baby.
A queen. Alien. So don't none of that fly. Just get
just before we get into it, because I want to hear why it doesn't fly, because I love this stuff. But for people who may be new to the show, the way we're structured is we pick a conceit from sci-fi or fantasy. Hakeem will look at the idea of, does this fly scientifically, or could it fly if we had the right technology or knowledge? I look at it from, how does the device or story conceit help to tell the story? Does it fly or not? And then the last one will be, does it fly for the vibes? So back to you with the science.
All right. So now the science is in two parts. That's what I'm getting at here. The first part is the cloning part. The second part is the hybridization part. So the thing about cloning is that you're not making a replica of an animal. You're creating a twin. All right. So you would have made Ripley's twin. You would not have made a replica of Ripley who has her memories and who is pregnant like dead Ripley may have been when she died, right? That, and you start with the baby, right? You start from a blastocyte that becomes a fetus, that becomes a baby that you didn't have to teach. You're not born with a mind full of ideas and memories if you're a clone. So that part of it just is ridiculous, right? That part of the movie is just kind of ridiculous. Although, I'm going to tell you, the movie has a lot of detractors. I'm not one of them. I can remember going with my buddies to watch this movie, right? It was a dude night out, and we cracked up. We loved it. When the baby alien showed up, that was, right? Even though I'm a physicist, I don't look at the science in movies and go, oh, the science not right, you suck. I don't do that unless it's something that spreads, throughout the world. See, now I have to tell the story. I would tell you about the story where I did voice acting for Charles Schwab.
What? No.
Yeah.
What?
So the script was calls, puts, spreads, straddles. Know your options. All right. So I'm in the booth and I say that line. And the director, you know how you have on the headphones, they got to press the button?
Yeah.
The director goes, Hakeem, where are you from? And I go, I grew up mostly in Mississippi. And she says, oh, I didn't catch that when you auditioned. The word is spreads, not spreads. So I just did it again. I just said spreads the way I say spreads from my Southern way of speaking. I code switch with some words that just comes out. Yeah. But, bad science can spread via movies. It's a rare thing, right? But because it's so rare, I don't really care about it. I'm more about the entertainment side and the creativity of it, right? How are you using these ideas? So I think that for this movie, using cloning in a way, that's, people use cloning. Jurassic Park used cloning in a very clever way, right? In this one, I feel like they should have given us some science that does not yet exist to justify her having memories, to justify her being pregnant, to justify her coming out as an adult. They don't do any of that, right? They don't do any of that. Now, on the other side of it, I find it really interesting when this baby comes out and when Ripley is created, both are hybrids of alien and human. And so the question is can you splice together genes like this to create a new creature where Ripley now has new powers and the alien reproduces in different ways? It now reproduces like a human, like a mammal. Instead of laying eggs, it's live birth. I think the second one does fly. I think that, if you look at the evolution even of animals like ourselves, one of the recent studies found that, the myelin sheath that coats our nerves that allows long range, fast transfer of signals, of electric signals in the nerves, that came from a virus. So retroviruses are these viruses that do gene splicing, right? They're CRISPR. They insert their DNA into our DNA, and those DNA sequences can remain for hundreds and thousands of generations and give you new properties, right? And so it looks to me like life is made. Viruses serve this purpose. Half is estimated that half of all genetic diversity of Earth life is in viruses. So just like we can purposefully use CRISPR to edit genes to create whatever characteristics we want. Let me take something from here. Let me take Roundup and put it in my corn. And now we don't have to spray it with pesticides. It creates its own. Or, you can take these properties from one living thing and add them to another living thing through gene editing. And that's exactly what happens here in this movie. They don't call it that, right?
Do you think taking that a step further, because you're basically saying like we're already living in this world of genetic splicing and crossover.
Yeah.
So taking that a step further, do you think it can go as far as to have a creature that comes out on the other side that their whole way of reproduction is adapted or is a hybrid?
I think that, again, if you attempt to do something like this and you don't really fully understand everything, right? You might be able to add the gene that does that, but then the thing comes out with like arms sticking all out of his head, right? Everywhere, there are these unintended consequences. Right. You made this one change. But I don't see why not. I don't know the rules of, like, for example, if you're looking at cloning humans versus cloning a sheep, what you're doing is you're taking a nucleus out of one animal, which contains this DNA evidence, and putting it in another cell. And so there are these proteins that are near the nucleus that are used in this process. And so for humans, those proteins are really close to the nucleus. So when you go to suck the nucleus out of an egg, you will damage those proteins. You get a non-viable new entity. And so for humans, the success rate of cloning or this gene splice, whatever the hell they call it, it's like 10% or something.
Yeah, I mean,
really
my
low.
understanding is that part of the reason that like you can make a hybrid, but part of the issue in making a hybrid that can then actually reproduce is the fact that you have put together two different creatures that have different ways of doing so, and then they don't like, either there's different chromosomal numbers, they don't connect up to
right.
Allow that to happen.
But I don't see that as a big problem. You don't necessarily have it need to be reproduced. You can just make them whenever you want to make them, right?
Don't tell that to the alien queen.
Right. Yeah, I know. The alien queen wants to do it the good old fashioned way. But, Brave New World, right? Alien queen meets Brave New World, the goat in the bag. But, with GMO corn or some other, I don't know which crop it is, because, some of them crossbreed with the regular ones and farmers get sued.
Yeah.
You're using our GMO stuff. But then there are others where you can't. So I saw this when I used to work in Africa a lot, that they get these seeds from these big companies, but they don't naturally have seed to make next year's crop from those, right? And so that's an issue. So yeah, I think ultimately with enough experimentation, you will find the constraints that you're working within, right? But this is really, even though I don't know if you can still call it its infancy, but you know, it's certainly a science that's far less than a century old. So to me, that's kind of, you know, it's not that mature, right?
Yeah.
It's maturing.
Mhm.
Because you know, if you think of electricity and magnetism, right? You're almost at 200 years. You get to the 2060s, you're at 200 years
Right.
of the Maxwell's equations, right? So we're not. I don't know when this stuff started. The 90s, gene editing.
Mhm.
So we're what 30 years
Yeah,
into it or something,
it's
30,
still
40
nascent
years.
when you look at when you compare it to
That's
other
right.
sciences and where we are.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know enough to know what the limitations are, but I do know that this type of genetic hybridization that is done exclusively via gene splicing, no ligers involved, right? It's not like you're mating the animals naturally and creating a mule, right? You're yeah, you're doing some stuff in the lab and you're
Mhm.
creating that's happening, right? So could you make it reproduce in a completely different way? Isn't this how platypuses came into existence? I mean, you know, there are all these exceptions, right? The platypus that lays eggs, the sharks that give live birth,
Mhm.
you know, where others are laying eggs and not incubating them inside their
Yeah.
bodies. So, you know, when it comes to reproduction, there's always a lot of strategies taken, and nature tends to use diversity as a precursor to adaptability. The more diversity you have within your population and the more plastic you are, the more easily you can adapt to changing environments and these sort of things, right? And what makes us humans so dope is that we don't have to wait for nature to change things anymore. We now have that ability to adapt species or create new species. Like they create
Mhm.
artificial cells, right? They synthesize cells. So can we make clones of you and me, not AI, but actual living
No, living
clones?
clones. Yeah.
Yeah, and have them have our memories? No. Have them come out fully like us? No. Have them mate with a pig and have a human pig clone? Maybe. Human pig hybrid? Maybe. I don't, because we are hybrids. We're already hybrids of viruses and mammals at minimum. Neanderthals and sapiens, Denisovans and sapiens, we are that.
All right. So if I'm hearing this correctly, your answer to does it fly is a two-parter.
Hell no, maybe.
All right. I get that. I get that.
Hell no, maybe.
Hell no,
What does our
maybe.
little rocket do?
But
There was an episode earlier where I said yes, no, where it would,
right.
now it's hell no, maybe. So,
If you're listening to this as opposed to watching this on YouTube or the website, there are graphics that go along with
oh yeah.
our yes or no or hell no, yes, maybe. Does it fly? So Hakeem has just given a nice big challenge to our graphics designer. But that,
Love it, love it.
but the stuff that you're talking about on the science side, I think is really interesting when you get to the story piece of this, right? So, like, again, like we don't review the movie as a whole. That's not what we're about. We're about looking at a particular element of it and how that factors in. So,
Well, here's the question though.
yeah,
For this one, are you keeping it just encapsulated within Resurrection, or are you bringing it all for?
just Resurrection. We've
Okay, just
done, yeah,
Resurrection.
we've actually, I mean, for people who may not know, we've actually done a previous episode on a different element of the Aliens
Yeah,
franchise. So go listen if you're enjoying this one. When you're done, go listen to that one. But no, this one is particular to Resurrection and
gotcha.
the mammalian, reptilian,
Insectidy.
insectoid
Yeah.
crossover when it comes to breeding and reproduction.
Yes. Yes.
So when you look at that, where my brain goes to the question of, does it fly? Does it serve the story that we're trying to tell or that the filmmakers are trying to tell? And so with every good sci-fi, there's a what if at the beginning that the filmmakers, the creators ask the audience to take a leap of faith with, and then how do they fulfill that? And in this case, with Resurrection, it is this leap of faith, this what if that this cloning could happen, that they could have found her blood from, the old ship, they could have created these clones, and then so on and so forth. So my feeling is like I'm down with the what if. Like I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Because it's 200 years in the future, and as you said, we're still in the nascent stages of this part of this science. So I'm like, yeah, who knows what the hell they're gonna figure out in 200 years, right? So
You got that right.
so
Yeah.
as like a layperson, I was like, sure, why not? I get that.
Yeah.
So I was okay. But the other thing I think that helped me with that is one of the big centerpiece scenes in the movie is when Ripley 8, because Sigourney Weaver is playing an 8th version of a clone of Ripley, discovers the lab where they have been growing all of the previous versions of her. So it actually helped me with the believability and take that leap of faith that it wasn't like this perfect thing where they just have a drop of blood and suddenly Ripley comes from that full blown. No. Like
Yeah.
what she sees in there is really messed up. Like different
Yeah.
versions of alien human hybrids. And she actually Ripley 7, then they're all in these, crazy cases where you see them growing, and most of them are not. The only one that's conscious is a Ripley 7, which is a really scary version. And, it brings to mind like any kind of, animal experimentation where you feel for what is happening to the animals. Like Ripley looks at this, Ripley, who is a hybrid, who a theme for this movie has really been like, what am I? And she's looking around and she is just heartbroken. And so
Oh, poor Ripley.
I know. So, and of course, like Sigourney Weaver's amazing and is able to convey like the complexity of all of it, right? Like, so you've got the perfect leading lady to do it. But the fact that you see that this has been a process of trial and error helps
Right.
me as the watcher buy
Yeah.
into it. So that's
Yeah.
one piece that I
Yeah.
thought
Good
worked
point.
really well to nudging me that way. But then,
Right.
also thinking about like, well, what's the story that we want to tell here? I
Mm.
think that the cloning and the crossover really helps to kind of tell this story about some thematic questions, which are, what are the lines when it comes to experimentation? What are the ethics of cloning? And we see that with her in the lab when she's horrified, and and all of that happens. And then also this question of sort of this recurring theme of bodily autonomy, which I'm focusing on Resurrection, but that has been, a continuing theme in all of the Alien movies. Ripley 8, the clone, had absolutely no choice and I do want to clarify one thing. She had absolutely no choice in carrying the baby. And by baby, we mean the alien queen baby. We don't mean a human baby. So the whole purpose of this experiment has been that once again, the US government has decided these aliens could make great bioweapons. What bad
Yeah.
could happen? We know how to control them. So let's find a way to breed them. Let's
See,
use.
that was another. That's not what we're talking about, but the whole idea of alien under glass. Yeah, we just got them just hanging around doing
Yeah,
experiments. They're alive and not scary like they used to be. That
yeah.
is kind of like, huh?
We know what we're doing here. It's fine. They'll never want revenge for what we're putting them through.
Right. Yeah.
It's 200 years later. We've forgotten how
Yeah.
absolutely horrible they are, and how smart they are. So,
Right.
so anyway, so Ripley 8, the clone, is never who apparently has all of Ripley's memories, or many of them.
Yeah.
She's not given a choice about birthing this
Mm-mm.
creature. And what they do is this all happens in the beginning of the movie. They actually, it seems like in their sort of trial and error in trying to reproduce these creatures, this is where they try something different, where for the first time they're able to extract the baby alien from Ripley. So, you see they cut her chest open, they take the baby alien out, they put it into a containment chamber. And then there's the question of like, are we going to keep Ripley alive? Like, do we have a need for her? But the scientists are curious. they want to see what happens, like I would imagine most scientists would. So,
Absolutely.
there's always
Yeah.
the what's going to happen with our experiment. So they keep her alive
Yeah.
in a containment chamber. They actually have this question of like, what kind of intelligence does she have? What kind of memory does she have, if any? You see them with flashcards trying to teach her things. So it's not a
Yeah.
foregone conclusion that she will have intelligence. They actually remark on the fact that this is unusual. She's the only one out of all the clones that they've grown that's able to do this. But there's no bodily autonomy there. And then the new queen also births a clone. She didn't choose to make it a hybrid. She didn't choose how that was going to happen. So the new queen is essentially Ripley 8's offspring. And then she births, and we get the newborn, who is this total new hybrid.
A Xenorip.
A who?
Xenorip.
And then this question of bodily autonomy, like it is a little different, but it even extends to another part of the setup of the movie is that there is essentially a ship called the Betty, which is full of a bunch of the, I don't know, what would you call them? Rogues, space rogues, who deliver a set of prisoners who have basically been brought to the Auriga, the main ship, the science ship, where the science is happening, to serve as hosts for the alien eggs. Those prisoners have no bodily autonomy either.
Yeah,
So and that gets into that you could lead from that into all kinds of thematic questions about do prisoners have rights? What should happen with their bodies? What are they allowed to do? Should rapists be castrated? All the horrible things that happened, with the Tuskegee experiment, or the Tuskegee Institute. There was the institute where, for folks who may not be familiar, it was an incredibly unethical syphilis study where you had approximately, I think it was about 600 African-American men who basically they were studied. They weren't told that they had syphilis, and
they had bad blood.
Yeah,
that's what they were told. Yeah,
and then they were denied treatment so that they could then study them. And
yeah, exactly.
No, and there ultimately was actually an act of Congress that was passed to prohibit this kind of thing happening in the future. So it brings up all of these themes. So the fact that you have, this thing happening as part of the story that then brings up these deeper themes. And of course, there's always the motherhood theme, right? We saw that we saw that in Aliens, which is the second one with Ripley and Newt. In here, you have this interesting question of Ripley gives birth to the queen, who then gives birth to the newborn. The newborn actually seems to bond with Ripley 8, the clone, instead of the queen, as they all question, what am I? And you see Ripley really torn because Ripley 8 has qualities of both. She seems to be mostly human, but she has qualities of a xenomorph. So that question as well, who's she going to be loyal to? You see the crew question who she's going to be loyal to. Again, so it supports the theme of the movie. Now, whether that's interesting to you or not, to one that, that's a personal question. But I do think that the way that they've laid it in there works story-wise.
The Alien franchise keeps their stories tight.
Yep, I would say for Alien Resurrection, the idea of mammalian, reptilian, insectoid, hybrid birthing flies.
Yeah, it when you put it into those contexts, right? It's like, oh man, yeah, I see this is a lot deeper than just a monster movie.
So building on that, I mean, do you, if we're going to our third piece of does it fly for the feels?
Right.
I guess the question might be if you could change the way we birth as humans, would you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That is really, really a tough one because again, there's that thing of unintended consequences. And then there is the, how many people die every year in childbirth, right? I mean, human childbirth is not as sure thing as it is with many other animals, right? We have a high mortality rate. So, and that's why You see now with all of the liability issues that a lot of doctors go right to C-section, right? That's safer than a normal natural delivery. So yeah, I feel like that is something that is not so clear cut to me. I think about A Brave New World, that kind of thing, right? And I think about even The Matrix, where you're growing babies, and there's something that we can do. We've done it with another animal at least once that I've seen, right? You grow the animal in a bag, and I tell you, I'm a dude. I don't plan on getting pregnant, right? I don't think I have the ability.
Not yet.
But if I did, I do not understand women. I would not choose that. I'm like, I've seen what happens. Basically, you're saying, allow me to get parasiticized. I don't want a tapeworm. I don't want that, that nasty worm in your leg. And I don't want a human inside growing in my belly up to 10 pounds with extra. Like, that just looks horrible. Like, bleh,
What? Careful,
looks
you're gonna have a lot of
horrible.
pregnant women very angry at you.
If you could reproduce, if humans could reproduce without, you had a choice of, it's sort of like the choice of the C-section, not a C-section, epidural. I've known women who are like, oh no, I'm going to do it completely natural. I don't want the epidural. And then in the heat of battle is like, give me the damn epidural.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see people making that choice, right? Because they're going to think, there are changes to the body that occur post-pregnancy.
Sure.
And, vanity, all is vanity. People are going to make the choice just for that. Like, yeah, I'll go in, but to get my lips injected and my butt lifted, I'm not going to give birth.
Right.
So I think that for me, that sort of technology, how you get to human implementation is a fraught path. Human experimentation, it ain't cool. Even mammal experimentation is fraught, right? So, how you get there in an ethical way, I don't understand or see that pathway. But if it exists somehow already and we know it to be safe and work, I think that people should be given the choice and then see how that comes out, right? And then you find 3 generations later that everybody who was born from that process can, bond with animals and
yeah, look,
there's
just stuff we're not going to know until down the line. But no, I mean, I agree. Yeah. Look, I think you're right. Human/mammal experimentation. There's a lot of tricky potholes there along the way. That said, there's a million different ways to have a family, and I'm very glad that there are so many women that I know who, for whatever reason, if they have not been able to have it become pregnant in what I'll call the quote unquote historically traditional way, that science is now given all kinds of options. And I think that's beautiful and important. And then, obviously there are people, like you said, who choose for vanity reasons or whatever other reasons. So I'm all for everybody having the personal choice that they want, and everyone gets to choose what they want to do. I want to make that super, super clear. I'm not going to talk about politics, but super clear for reproductive freedom.
Speaking of which, did you see there was these guys who were sort of serial sperm donors and ended up having hundreds of kids?
Yes, I have seen that. Well, that one of my favorite movies, I think we've talked about this before, is Code 46, which is set in the future, and everybody has to be genetically tested because you're just living in an era of donors and IVF. It's so commonplace that if you're going to get together with someone and do it, you need to make sure you're not just too closely genetically related. But I guess to put a fine point on the if you could change the way we reproduced, would I? I mean, I don't know. What I can tell you is, just to be perfectly open, I have one kid, had a very traditional pregnancy. I ended up with a C-section for a million reasons that I won't bore you all with. But, there were things I loved about pregnancy and things I did not love about pregnancy. It definitely felt like at times there was a little alien growing inside me. she was punching and I'd feel a
Movie.
heel and moving and all of that at the same time.
That's
Like
so weird.
for me,
Yeah.
there was also something, not to sound like all woo about it, but for me, especially as somebody who was not sure if I was going to have kids, having that 9-month incubation period gave me time to think about like to essentially bond and think about how my life was going to change and all of that. And for like me as a thinking person, I needed that. I needed that time. And there was also something just kind of amazing about like being able to do this. Our bodies are pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
I
I can
would not
imagine.
want to eliminate that possibility.
And you know what?
I love the idea that we can perhaps expand options again because
Exactly.
I want everybody to be able to have the family
Yeah.
they may want to have, and however that
Right.
can happen, is
Yeah.
great. So I guess my answer to does it fly to like expand this is like maybe like
Maybe. So
in an ethical way. Yes. Maybe
right. So
yes,
you
but
know what you
ethically.
said. Yes, but ethically, I'm with you there on that. But what you said is you've had friends and family
Mhm.
who had these
Mhm.
experiences, and it made my mind go to my sister.
Yeah.
Right. So my older sister, she had 3 miscarriages
Mhm.
before she was able to successfully carry a child to term.
Yeah.
And I mean that meant everything to her. She
Mhm.
so desperately wanted to have a baby, and she did. And she had picked out the baby's name when we were little kids and told me. And then when the baby was born, now she's my niece she turned 40 this year.
Wow.
So it's like, whoa, how's that possible?
Yeah.
I'm only 25. So, but when you see people who so desperately want to, but because of physiology, it's not possible. And if there was an alternative, people, like you said, people would do it for various reasons. And I'm pretty sure that there will be those who choose the old school method, right? That's yeah.
Any and
Okay.
all choices. Thumbs up.
Any and all choices. So it flies with you, it flies with me. If it's developed ethically and it's implemented ethically, let's do it. You're not making clone armies to, get rid of the Jedi.
No, that's an entirely different episode.
It is always amazing hanging out with you.
Same. I love talking about this stuff with you. And I want to thank everyone
Yeah.
for tuning in, for listening to our ramblings and our science and our
Yeah.
story. If you want more Does It Fly, we usually have a new episode every Friday, either on YouTube, on Does It Fly, our website, or on your favorite audio platform.
And you know what, people? I've been reading your comments, and one of the things I see you guys saying over and over is when one of us is talking, y'all love how the other one is so into it. You got to meet this lady, man. I'm telling you. Get some more Tamara. Look her up. She's real cool and smart. So, I'm listening I'm hanging on your every word. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks again, Hakeem. Always a pleasure. Back
Take care.